Good day, everyone. I'm Peter Scove, and this is Music is a Journey. Today's topic is going to be songs that were written and recorded by Canadian artists that were then covered by non-Canadian artists. Why would this be a topic of interest? Well, okay, so here's why I think it's really important when Canadian songs are covered by artists in other countries, eh? You see, like when we're growing up in Canada, we hear music from the United States, we hear music from over across the Atlantic in the UK, we think all that music's really great. And so our artists, they write songs and they don't really get known all that well outside of Canadian borders, eh? So like when one of the songs by a Canadian band becomes popular overseas or over across the border, and then one of those artists actually decide that they want to cover a Canadian song on their album, well, that makes us feel really special, eh? Because it means it's like affirmation that Canadian music is actually pretty cool. So yeah, that's why I thought I want to do this video and I want to talk about that, eh? All right. So there you have it. All right, I'm going to start off. If you had asked me just a few weeks ago, who recorded the song I Go Blind? I would have told you, I'm not really sure. I remember the song, every time I look at you, I go blind. It was very popular in the 1990s for a little while, but I don't remember who did it. And if you told me, oh, it was Hootie and the Blowfish, I would have thought, oh yeah, okay, I remember that, Hootie and the Blowfish. Well, as it turned out, a few weeks back, I was thinking about checking out a band that is from the municipality next to the city where I grew up. I knew they were a local band, but I never got into them, and just a few weeks ago I thought, I've never really checked out their music. Let me see what they do. And when I searched for them, the first song that came up was I Go Blind. And I thought, now that's a curiosity. I thought, okay, so they were the ones who did I Go Blind. Okay. Now remember, this is a couple of weeks back when, a few weeks ago, when actually I wouldn't have thought of Hootie and the Blowfish. So I thought, oh, okay, so that's why that song was on the radio so much, because they were a local band. Well, thinking about this idea of songs by Canadian artists that were then covered by non-Canadian artists, I put a post on the Facebook group Canadian Music Lovers and asking anybody to give some suggestions just to see if there was anything that I had or I knew of that I had missed. And somebody said, well, the song I Go Blind by 5440 was covered by Hootie and the Blowfish. And it was like, oh, okay, that just kind of collapsed everything together then. Now I understand. Yes, indeed, I Go Blind appeared on 5440's album from 1986. Looks like a self-titled album. I just got this about a week ago now, finally. And it's track number 3 on here, I Go Blind. So I was kind of curious. I listened to 5440's 1986 version, and I thought, wow, that really sounds like how I remember the song. So I went to YouTube and listened to the Hootie and the Blowfish version, and holy smokes, Hootie and the Blowfish did it basically exactly the same way. All we have are different vocalists and a 1990s recording quality as opposed to a mid-80s recording quality. But they did the song pretty much exactly as 5440 originally did it. Okay, so that is the first. Now, the whole thing that actually sparked this idea actually goes back a few years, but I bring it up from time to time when the opportunity arises. This is a band called The Churls, and this is their 1968 debut album. They only released 2 albums in the 1960s, and altogether only 2. The Churls are a heavy, I don't really want to say psychedelic, because they're more in the neighborhood of Cream from, well, let's pick their more heavy hard rock stuff from Disraeli Gears and Wheels of Fire, and as well there are moments where they have a Rolling Stones feel to them. Particularly one track on here really sounds very similar to Jumping Jack Flash. In fact, so similar I had to check the release dates to see which one came first, and it seems Jumping Jack Flash was released at least 2 or 3 months prior to this album, but again, I'm not sure. Anyway, on their debut album, the Churls have a song called Timepiece, which is actually a pretty cool, heavy track number, and it's about, time keeping track of your life. And when I heard it, I thought, I know this song. I've heard this before. And, as a matter of fact, I have heard it before on this album here. This is Blood Rock's debut album from 1970. Now, Blood Rock are a downer rock or heavy, hard, heavy rock band from Texas, whereas the Churls, they're a band from Ontario. Well, the Churls, after recording their first album, or actually maybe they even did record their first album in California, certainly they recorded the second album in California, which means they were around in the States 68, 69. Which means that it's possible that they might have been touring around and maybe Blood Rock got a hold of that song and decided to cover it. Still though, I found it a little bit difficult to believe that a Texas band would cover a Canadian band, especially one that was, you know, if they'd covered Steppenwolf, might not have been a surprise, but the Churls? So I looked into it. And the Blood Rock album does actually give the credits of the songwriters for the song Timepiece, which are not the members of Blood Rock, obviously. But I thought still it's possible that this is just another song by, say, like The Animals or maybe something else from the early 60s, and maybe both bands covered that song. But no, when I matched up the names for the songwriting credits for Timepiece on here, they matched the names of the band members on here. So there you go, Timepiece. Both versions actually really good. I like them both. Another song worth mentioning is Joni Mitchell's This Flight Tonight off her album Blue. I actually had this on CD in the 1990s. Unfortunately, it went out with a bunch of CDs I was getting rid of some 10, 15 years ago, and I really shouldn't have done that. I gave away, sold off for a very low price, a lot of stuff that I'm now thinking I should have kept, or at least saved in the computer. But anyway, that album features the song This Flight Tonight, and in my grade 10 year of school, I was a big Nazareth fan, had all their albums on cassette, and this one here, Loud and Proud, their fourth album and second one with Roger Glover producing, features a cover of the song This Flight Tonight, and it is actually one of Nazareth's more famous songs. I really like their version of that song, which is why I decided to get the Joni Mitchell version, which I seem to remember liking, just because I could hear that's how the original version was. It has a nice story in the lyrics, and the Nazareth version, certainly I like the music. Interesting point, their chugging, galloping type riff, that that Nazareth do for their version of This Flight Tonight, inspired Heart to write their riff for Barracuda, which very similarly goes that little twist there at the end. So Joni Mitchell's This Flight Tonight, covered by the Scottish hard rock band Nazareth. Another kind of curious one here. This is the debut album by Klaatu, 3:47 Eastern Standard Time, right? EST? That's right. And the opening track on here is called Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft, which is about 7 minutes and 18 seconds. All right. Klaatu, curiously, this album, when it was originally released, they had no photos of the band and didn't even include the band member names. And there was a misunderstanding. One music journalist was quite certain that this was a secret Beatles album, that the Beatles had secretly gotten back together and released a new album. Well, you can hear a lot of Beatles influence in the music of Klaatu, and that's something that I think they have never denied. But anyway, this opening track here, Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft, got the attention of the Carpenters. And the Carpenters covered that. Now, I have actually heard at least once somebody say they prefer the Carpenters version, and I think I listened to it once on YouTube, and it was all right. But I've always preferred the Klaatu version anyway. I like most of the tracks off this album. Yeah, and actually an interesting thing, I did not know Karen Carpenter was a drummer until only, like 2-3 months ago. For some reason it just suddenly showed up in my YouTube feed, a video of Karen Carpenter back in the, early 70s, playing drums in her brother's band. And yeah, she was quite a kick-ass drummer. Interesting that she actually moved on to being a vocalist, leaving the drum behind there, but she was a great musician. Okay, so anyway, the Carpenters covering the song Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft, originally released on Klaatu's debut album. Was it 76? 19? Oh, I can't see. Okay, I really do probably need glasses or something. But anyway, 76 or 78, I can't tell. Around that time. All right, well, here's one that I don't have either of the two albums, but I did have one of them on cassette in the 1980s. And to buy the CD now, it's gonna cost me, so I don't have it. I'm talking about Uriah Heep's album Head First from 1983. I wasn't really taken by this album. Abominog, I was kind of split. Some songs I thought were really cool, and some of them were just, it's alright. But Head First never really grabbed a hold of me. But there was one song on there that I thought was the standout track, and that was a song called Lonely Nights. I don't know when I found this out. It might have been a year or two ago, but I think when I was looking at the songwriting information of the songs on Head First, probably on the Wikipedia page, I discovered that Lonely Nights was written by Jim Vallance and Bryan Adams. Jim Vallance, of course, being Bryan Adams' songwriting partner for, I don't know, are they still together? I don't have an idea. But certainly for a long, long time, they were songwriting partners. So as it turned out, Lonely Nights was originally a Bryan Adams song, which then Uriah Heep covered for their Head First album. And when I actually checked YouTube the other day to try to find the Bryan Adams version, it's not on YouTube, I found that the another solo artist, his name is Jorn. Probably pronounced Jorn in English, but I know it as Jorn because that was my father's name. And it's a Danish name, so the J is pronounced not J. But anyway, beside the point, apparently Jorn, or Jorn, however you want to say it, he also covered Lonely Nights. Okay, so moving on now to something I do have. This here is an album by a band group, whatever, named Leggett, which is named after one of the members, Hugh Leggett, and his brother, whose name I have... Gordon Leggett. There we go. I can actually see that. Hugh and Gordon Leggett, two brothers, and this is an album called Luminations. I think it goes back to 1982. Yes. Hugh Leggett, as I've said before in other videos, he was in Lords of London, a 60s pop rock group who later on became Nucleus, releasing one album of really early progressive rock with lots of organ and guitar, heavy organ, psychedelic type stuff. And then Nucleus lost a couple of members and picked up two other people and became A Foot in Cold Water, who recorded the song Make Me Do Anything You Want, which was later on covered by Helix, so Canadian band covering a Canadian band. But anyway, their album Luminations got the attention of Blue Oyster Cult, and Blue Oyster Cult, I will confess, actually, some of the tracks on here do sound like perfect songs for Blue Oyster Cult to cover. But as it turned out, Blue Oyster Cult, they picked a few and they decided they were going to go with one called White Flags, which appears on their much maligned 1985 release Club Ninja, the least popular album in Blue Oyster Cult album rankings. But as I've said too, this is my second Blue Oyster Cult album, and I actually quite like it. Not everything. There are some moments that are a little bit too 80s in the synthesizer. Drums, of course, also have that 80s sound, but musically, there are several songs on here I like, and White Flags is actually one of my favorites. Listening to it, it's very, very similar to the Leggett version. One big difference is that one thing I always liked on here is there's this one part with this organ that comes in, and I really like that organ sound. It's like descending organ notes, like this. And the Leggett version, it's synthesizer and it just doesn't have the power that the organ sound does on the Blue Oyster Cult one. So very similar sounding, but Blue Oyster Cult adding something to it. So I actually do like the Blue Oyster Cult version better. So that's Leggett with White Flags, covered by Blue Oyster Cult. Okay, one more to talk about. I recently talked about Krokus. And this was my first Krokus album, Headhunter. And on here, there is a song called... There's actually a couple of songs here with night in the title, but there's a song called Stayed Awake All Night, which I felt had a different feel to it from the rest of the album, and I quite liked it. Well, as it turned out, Bachman-Turner Overdrive originally recorded that. Now, I actually don't have the Bachman-Turner Overdrive version. I don't remember what album it's on. I only have a Bachman-Turner compilation up here, and it's not included on this compilation. I am thinking to get some of the original albums on CD though, and I certainly would like to hear that. But yeah, Stayed Awake All Night, covered by Krokus. Now, Krokus actually covered a lot of 70s songs. They covered Sweet, and I think there were a couple of other ones too that I'm not familiar with. But anyway, Stayed Awake All Night on Krokus's Headhunter album from, I think it's 1983, originally done by Bachman-Turner Overdrive, probably going back to 73, 74. Now, I realize there are a lot of other songs. I put this question into the Canadian Music Lovers group on Facebook. I got a lot of replies. Of course, there's American Woman, covered by Lenny Kravitz. There have been people covering These Eyes by the Guess Who. There have been people covering One Fine Morning by Lighthouse. I got a list of, a long list of answers. A lot of the songs actually I didn't know, and I don't know who did the original, and I don't know who did the cover version. Apparently Three Dog Night have covered some songs by Canadian artists. One or two anyway. And even I know that Steve Morse, he did a cover of La Via Strangiato by Rush on a Rush tribute album. But, you know, the Rush tribute album obviously is bands covering Rush songs, so I'm not actually going to consider those. But those are the ones that at least I have in my collection in either the original form or the cover version, or in the case of Uriah Heep, used to have. So there you go. That's my list. Hey, you know any that I didn't talk about? Please go ahead and mention them in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in another video. Bye.